today we want our practitioners to talk about honestly what's surprising them, what they're still figuring out, and what they wish they'd seen sooner. So I'm going to dive right in with Andy and Eric. So Andy, you've been writing about in Forbes Tech Council and on Substack over the last 30 days. And when you talk about the anti-patterns in AI tooling, what do you mean? Is that a bug, a workflow failure, a pitch problem? What
Uh,
stands out for you?
I think the biggest part might be the fact that the process needs to be changed and updated as you're going. One of the conversations that we heard internally in a project recently is if you find yourself doing something over and over again, as you, a single contributor, make a skill that kind of contains that so that it can be shared to all the other team members working on the same thing. And that way we're all starting to do things consistently. In non AI development, everybody developed the same, but you still had to integrate together. And so that was the gate where we would try to make things consistent, either through defining, what are our coding standards or testing practices and all that kind of stuff. But now we have this new team member, if you will, AI. Pick one. It could be Claude or Chat GPT or whatever. But I think we have to do that more proactively now. And then the other part is really around, and I think we kind of touched on this in one of our past webinars. Now more than ever, all of the engineering standards and practices that we've always done, but that I have seen us getting away from as an industry is, more young people come into it and maybe haven't done these things. We've been getting away from unit testing and integration testing and having coding standards and having different agreements within the team that we will all kind of develop in a certain way, or architectural best practices. Now more than ever, all that stuff being defined and being set up as a guardrail, you have to have so that AI can follow those rules. Otherwise, AI will follow the rules of the code that it scrapes off of GitHub somewhere. So um, I don't know, Eric, you may have a different opinion on that.
I know I don't. It's, it's not much, it ain't much different than the senior developer that searched I would say, well, Codeplex or Code Project or all these other things and copied and pasted some code into
Right.
into the project and didn't have any tests for it. It's just happening at 1,000 times the rate that it could happen before.
What are some, Eric, what are some most recent moments where something has gone sideways that what did that look like?
I mean, it happened yesterday on a project. We developed the pattern, right? A lot of people are talking about loop engineering, right? So you're no longer just prompting your AI, you have a loop, and the loop is just, I don't, I'll say more sophisticated workflow, but it's not more sophisticated. It's just here's a list of steps, and it would be all the steps you do to implement some code. Uh, Make a skill, make it repeatable, start doing it, and at the end of it, I typically will interrogate the agent, asking it, "Hey, did we do X, Y, Z?" It's like, "Oh, I did. I skipped that step." Wait, wait, that was an important step. Why did you skip that? Well, so depending on the model, depending on the harness running it, uh, what's great about AI is and generative AI and LLMs is it's non-deterministic. What's bad about writing software and doing following processes, those are supposed to be deterministic, right? We're supposed to get the same output with the same input. A lot of what's going sideways is me assuming because I defined the process and told it to do the process that it did the process. It's what was the old Ronald Reagan quote, trust but verify. It's it's even more important now to do the verification.
But I think even that leads into the other pattern that I think in general everybody should be doing is A, don't assume that just because you ask for it that it's happening, but B, be a little bit more proactive in that, and let's start pitting these AIs against each other. So as an example, when you're having a PR done or a code review done, you might use a different model to do that code review because it will look at that problem from a different point of view. But even in the processes that we build that are maybe like an agentic pipeline, I always bake in, hey, here's the work I want you to do. And then I build a rubric next to that. Hey, here's the work that was supposed to be done. Go make sure that we did the work. You as a human don't necessarily need to do that, although I do suggest that you do that with some frequency just to see that everything's working. But you can build into the process the ability for them to fight against each other to drive towards the right output.
Let's switch to a buyer's point of view. So if a buyer, wants to talk with someone who has AI and agentic building experience, what questions should they be asking, and what thought process should they be looking for from people like you?
Do you want to start or shall I?
Yeah, well, I'd start. I would say the questions are similar to finding any vendor or partner, right? You want to understand the rigor, like what's applied. Just because AI is the tool, you still want to check their work, and see for either from past clients or current clients, how's it going? It's some of the same things. I feel like the only industries that are really doing the proper level of due diligence are the ones that are already mandated to do it, right? Healthcare, banking, finance, because they know to ask all the questions that they've asked to human powered teams. But I think when you're when you're looking for an AI partner, it already seems like some black magic. So you feel like, you might not want to ask the questions you would if it was just, powered by humans. I don't know. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, so we're just to take it outside of AI and tech, we're currently looking to have our circuit breaker replaced in our house. So what is the first thing that you would do in that case? Go get three quotes. Well, we started down the road of getting three quotes and we got one quote that was like $3,000. And immediately, like, that doesn't pass my sniff test. The other quote was $20,000. And I'm like, whoa, that's like, I'm like, okay, go get three more quotes to figure out which of those first two is probably leaning the right direction. And the only reason that I bring that up is we actually have a customer in Inventive right now where they are forcing us. So we did the interview process, and everybody does some form of an interview process. But where most people stop is, okay, they passed my interview test. I like them. They sound like they can do the thing. They're smarter than I am. Like, all these things are emotional inputs. But this particular customer has asked us to actually go do some homework. Here is a thing. I want you to build it. It's a pretty big, aggressive thing. You have a short timeline. Let's see how far down that journey you can get. If you're looking for a partner that does magic that maybe you don't understand, having them actually do a demo of the thing might be one of the best things, because it's kind of like, let's go get three quotes, but let's also talk to their past customers and do all those things. I would remove as much of the emotion of it as you can and make your decision based on what you can actually see and touch and hear from other customers.
Yeah, because and also the language can start to cross over, get muddled, and so everybody's kind of saying the same thing using the all the right words that they probably got from AI. So, you probably, while you need to take the emotion out, you also need to um, find ways to build trust and come together.
So that I think that is actually worth expanding on. So they're saying the right words based on how you consume the information for where the industry is. And so Eric just mentioned, loop engineering. That's a completely new concept. Like, that didn't exist, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago from the frontier models. This is a new offering. And so if you're basing what somebody's talking to you about based on how much you're following the industry, well, they may sound smarter, but they may also not be following the industry in the way that they should, or at the same velocity that they should, and may completely be out of the loop. And what's fascinating to me right now with AI is the second you stop watching it, the whole industry has shifted. Like, a recent thing that's been fun to watch, like Anthropic has been the leading tool to use for code. Well, there was a blip in time that most people probably are not aware of where everybody's like, screw Claude, they're getting too expensive, they're not actually doing what I want. And now Codex, ChatGPT, all of a sudden has got this amazing model. And like, let's all, so for at least a week, maybe two, everybody was starting to like actively shift down the Codex side of the world. And then Claude released Fable 5 and Mythos and whatever. And it's like, ooh, Claude's amazing again. And it's like, so depending on who's paying the most attention, you'll see all these things and understand why that shift happened and why the shift back happened, why loop engineering is important, what other tools existed prior to that that are kind of solving the same problem, but not directly from the frontier model. Like it's an ever changing, wild west kind of environment right now.
Yeah. Yeah, keeping up is really challenging. And that's why we want to keep wanting to have these conversations, even if we're potentially treading over ground we covered 3 months ago, because I think that it is changing so quickly, and we need to be talking about it. One of the things, speaking of 3 months ago, one of the things that we talked about in the past is the stages of competency in AI. You know, could you create a proper prompt or whatever, the different stages? How have those stages shifted even in the last 3 to 6 months in terms of the expectation of competency?
My perception is there isn't one approach to a problem, and so if we think about all the count of stages keeps growing, but just because on one end there's this thing called like agentic agents, where you're giving the agents a goal and they're self-organizing and they're solving your problem. Well, just because that exists doesn't make that the right solution for the problem that you're solving. And just because it's at the extreme end of understanding AI still doesn't make it the right solution for the problem you're trying to solve. When I talk about business automation as an example, everybody wants that to be AI, but there's this whole pre-AI world where you're just connecting dots and massaging data and you have pipelines of data, and that's still totally relevant and has zero AI in it. And you should still stay focused on what problem am I trying to solve and what's the simplest solution that I can apply to solve that problem. It doesn't directly answer your question. I think. Well, I'll pause. I'll let Eric.
Okay, go ahead, Eric, and then we'll come back.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with what you just said. There's different levels as every new model comes out. What you're, how you're specifying your prompts and what you're doing changes because at some point you were over constraining something to get more output out of a dumber model, so to speak, right? And sometimes over constraining it then actually gets worse output out of the better model, right? So you every time there's a new update or of a frontier model, you also have to basically throw out everything you think you know and what's correct, and retest your assumptions and try things that you tried before and didn't work previously, because it's changing so fast that I think really how do you do correct prompting? It's you keep an open mind and you actually retry the things that you tried before because you may get a different output. What was insane before now isn't insane.
Yeah.
And I like what Andy said about like the stages have expanded. It's not like you're here and then you or you kind of step up to here and then step up to the third one. Now you're probably at 7 or 8 stage, because you're having to rethink and recalibrate for every new model that's coming out. Andy, did you want to add to that?
Well, and a good example, and unfortunately, all these answers kind of all blend together. You have to be paying attention, or you need to partner with somebody who's paying attention. Is kind of the default. But there was a Claude Design came out, and it was another one of those things where it's like, oh, now we can use a model to do design for us, and it was really cool for like 3 days because the other feedback that came from Claude Design is it will use all your tokens happily, and so it's kind of expensive to do what it's doing. But then, a lot of people started open sourcing using Claude to build the competitor to Claude Design. So now you have Open Design, does exactly the same thing. You can run it locally. But it's a fascinating thing that wherever you're at on your journey. So if there are all these stages and you're only 3 or 4 of them down, you can solve problems, which I think is the key takeaway. to some degree, you don't really have to pay attention to everything that's going on. People like Eric and I are like frantically trying to figure out what stays and what goes and so on. You just kind of need somebody around you that you can have periodic conversations with, and they'll catch you up, so to speak. It's like, oh, you can ignore these 50 things because this thing actually solved that. Um, I feel
Yeah,
like
I love the Discord, not the platform Discord, but the Discord that we're having internally, because that it's like a learning friction, in education, you always say that you need the friction to learn, and, creating that friction. Speaking of that, the temperature is getting a little hotter around the emotional response to AI. So, we talked about a story of a CEO who just banned AI outright, just sick of it, or just saw that his sales team was using it in the wrong way and going out to dead clients or something. But what do you feel like? What do you think is behind that emotional response that we're starting to see? Um, you know, and will probably continue.
Well, I don't think people trust AI, and I don't think that everybody has the time or maybe the curiosity to figure out how to make it work for you. I think we've touched upon before, company mandates thou shalt use the tool is not the right approach because you just force things to get broken. They're using the tool, but the outcomes are not great. I like the idea, and I say this frequently to our internal team. It's like, cool, you used AI to automate 80%, but you stopped. Like you solved your problem, but you didn't solve the problem, which is how much of this can I automate, and what is the part where we need to keep a human in. So, as an example, using AI to just automate your outreach, well, are you spamming your buddies? That was a thing that we tripped over. Or are you spending all this money outreaching to people that no longer exist? Or so there still has to be the human in that process. But I think that people are seeing in the news enough failure scenarios, but they're
Hmm.
not necessarily seeing any necessarily of the success scenarios or being part of the success conversation, or they're forcing it to happen. And so that's, forcing this emotional feedback. Well, it didn't work. We'll move on. It's a journey. Like, I don't know how else to put it. If you don't approach it as a journey and make incremental improvements to your team and your company's processes, then you're liable to step into a failure, and that may scare you away or cause you pain, or may wake up to an empty bank account because you automated all the things, and that costs a lot of money.
Well, we even had a conversation last week, Andy, with someone, and it was like, this is the most exciting time I've been in. I haven't been this excited in 6 to 10 years, and it's like, that was but that's doesn't feel like that's across the board.
I think that statement is only applicable to the people that love to have their cheese moved. Like, if you wake up and it's like, oh, the world is different,
Totally.
and I love that. But then you have people that just want to show up to work and do their work. And that's probably the greater majority of, I'm following my process and I'm doing my thing, and my outcomes have been good. So good is good enough. I don't think people enjoy this churn and chaos. And it could be a scary thing, but it's also could be an annoying thing.
Eric, your thoughts?
Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah, and I remember You Move My Cheese, the book, right? Reading
Mm-hmm.
through that and dealing with it and coming to terms with it. Yeah, there's some personalities that love it, some that don't. But back to the emotional thing, like I think, right, some of these emotional decisions would happen without AI. It would just uh, for the bad thing to happen and the emotional decision of, hey, we are never doing X again. And I've seen this happen at companies, right? They did something or they treated something some way. Hey, don't do that. Don't use anything. With AI, it's a tool. It's a tool that's a multiplier, and there are dangerous tools all over the earth, right? If I don't handle chainsaw properly, catastrophic things can happen. Because it's software and AI is essentially, we think of it as software. Uh, Anyone can pick it up, use it, and you still need this level of diligence to, well, what am I asking it to do, and what's it about to do? Uh, so it's really easy to say, yep, stop, hold the presses on everything, because maybe the wrong people were running it, or we didn't really think through what we were about to do with it. So uh, I kind of think back to right the Asimov book, right? You know, the iRobot and Foundations and all these series, right? In Foundations, they basically got rid of robots, right? And this is a book that was written in the 50s. So people who have already kind of gone through this kind
Thought
of
process.
journey of technology coming and seeing the bad parts of it, and then having kind of the pendulum swinging the other way. So it's interesting to see it in real life, and to see how ideas from 70 years ago are still in play.
But I think a business wants to go fast and wants to make money as fast as it can. And if you have 100 successes of going faster and making more money, and then you're on your AI journey, so you dangerously skip permissions. And so now I'm letting my tools go faster. And one of the cool things is people are buying a computer to just give to the AI so that they can go as fast as they want. Well, that just means that when you hit a problem, because we all will, the problem's going to be potentially exponentially bigger, like taking down a production environment in Amazon or something like that. Um, and I think that's a natural human state. It's like, well, it's working, so it'll just keep working. And if you haven't been on a 20 or 30-year long software journey where there are all kinds of pitfalls that if we don't do X, Y will happen. But the key here is that AI has brought software engineering and IT and DevOps. Those are things that anybody can do now. It doesn't mean they should.
This is probably a good time to talk about testing. We were preparing for this today. We were talking about the level of testing and the thousands and thousands of tests that need to be run. So, Eric, I'll leave it to you to jump on that.
Yeah. I think, we're talking about anti patterns. We went through this, and Andy, you kind of talked about a little earlier, if there's like this cycle of we should test, and we need the humans to test, and it's all the reasons why it helps us go faster. But as we went through this journey, just in software, it's like, hey, it when we make major changes, it costs a lot of money to do that with humans. And what's interesting is, by default, when you ask an agent to start to write something, make a system, it doesn't default with, I should have tests. But
I should
from
check
software
myself.
engineering, yeah, from software engineering, we know if we're going to build a system that needs to be reliable, that needs to be malleable, so we can keep making changes to it and make changes fast, then we need tests. Uh, just because you ask an AI agent to write a test, or hey, test your work, right? That's not a binary, oh, it tested or it didn't test, right?
Or
There's
it
levels
lied
to
to you.
testing.
It said it
Yeah.
tested everything's great and wasn't.
And it didn't. Yeah. So getting back to the thousands of tests, I have some systems that have, I think 8,000 tests, and it's in the financial space, and it needs that many tests. Uh, so I've been looking at, hey, depending on how important the system is, how many, I should have tests. It's not the number of tests, right? We have this thing called code coverage, which says, 100% code coverage means every single path in the software space is covered. 0% means zero is. If you just tell your AI to test, you're going to land somewhere between 40 and 60% maybe. And is it the right 40 or 60%? That was the same problem we had with human teams. So again, I find being explicit, hey, now it's actually cheaper to write the test and maintain the test. So I would lean towards more like the 80, 90% of test coverage for a system that's, running a business, things like that. But I think it's really easy to just go along with the AI and not give it specifics. And that's when problems are going to happen.
And do you want to add to that?
Well, it's interesting because our career is building AI or building software companies full of software engineers. And we do a lot of projects. And the first thing an engineer will stop doing when time gets tight and deliverables look like they might be missed and we need to get more done, an engineer will naturally stop writing tests because it's expensive. it also, every test that you write adds to your build time and your ability to integrate with each other. And so it does cost time and money, but then it amplifies the cost of time and money. But what we all seem to forget, at least the people doing it, is like, but it's also amplifying your ability to trust the system and know that when we ship a thing, it's going to work. Or in AI land, where I can do 10 to 100 times faster at building features, I'm adding features going to the left and breaking 3 features that went to the right, and this gets rid of that noise. So it always feels like you're going slower, and you are, but it's enabling you to deliver faster and safer and trust the system. So for non engineers, how do we ask them to test other than just say go test? But they won't know what a good test is. They won't know why that test is important. So
Mm. Yeah, so that having that engineering background is still so valuable. Um, I wanted to touch on the part about thinking about these systems in a human way, so we anthropomorphize them, as humans. And one of the things we were talking about before is, when does that switch over, and or is thinking about AI systems and agentic systems in terms of human roles, is that still valuable or
I'll let Eric start with what we
valid?
were talking about earlier.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I found personally when I was building a team of agents and I was like, hey, you're this role, go do this. And I gave it the wrong name. I called it a product manager and not a scrum master or a program manager. It started doing these things like slowing the process down, making sure things were 100% correct when what I wanted was drive the thing faster, make sure everybody's always working, even if they're agents, right? So what we got to there was, hey, all the LLMs are all trained on the internet. They're trained on stuff produced by humans. And so they understand what humans do. So thinking of them as humans or human roles, they're not actually humans, but that's the correct way to do it right now because that's what they've learned on. And I think I made a comment earlier that holds true until one of these models trains a new model that's solely based on some sort of binary computer input. And that's, I made a joke. I think that's when, the Terminator starts. It may have already started, but uh, when we get to a point where, they're training on some sort of output of the existing models that was not text based, on some human language, then I think that's when we get to a point where we no longer think of them or can interact with them like humans. Uh, but yeah, I think right now that's still the way to do it.
But I think from the other side of it, if I'm talking to a non-technical person about how to build agents, the easiest way is to talk to them in a non-technical way. And the paradigm there is, let's talk about every person you've ever hired to do a job. You don't hire one role and expect them to do 50 things from 50 different roles, but you also don't hire them and just say, here's 50 things to go do on day one. You expose them to the system, you expose them to the rules, you give them one task, you make sure they're doing that task right, then you expand that. And over time, their responsibilities may expand, but you still kind of need to keep their focus tight. And what you actually do to expand their responsibilities is pour more people underneath them that also have individual focus. So somebody good at managing, well, they become a manager and they're not doing the work as much anymore. And that's the best way, at least for me, to think about, how do I build an agent? How many responsibilities do I give them? How many tools do I give access to them? How many systems do they have access to? Partly because I want to limit their blast exposure in case they do bad things, but also because the tighter their focus, the better their results, better inputs, better outputs, and then that narrow focus. So it's we talked earlier about giving Claude as an example, go build me this thing, and then asking them to go test it and asking them to follow the rules, and then they don't follow the rules. So I wouldn't ask Claude to be combative with itself, just like I wouldn't ask a human to go do a thing and then be combative with itself. You stand up somebody else next to it and give it the sole responsibility. Hey, be an asshole about the thing that I'm going to have you review. And I may or may not listen to your input, but be extreme. Like take the extreme point of view about how did that guy perform? And in the middle is kind of the story that you want to follow. So
And what occurs to me is that, or, the conversation we've all been having is, while we think of them as humans and we give them, human roles and titles, or, direction, what, how do we estimate time? How do we estimate what it's going to take? And like, you might think it's going to take 10 to 14 hours, and then you walk away and you're like, oh, it's done. you know?
that's been for me the most fascinating part. And we've actually internally started, or individually probably started looking at this. I've used the tools enough now that when it says, "Oh man, that's going to take 3 months to build this thing," are you sure you want me to do this, or should I start this tomorrow? Like, you go to bed and we'll start this tomorrow. I'm like, bro, it's going to take you like less than an hour. Just go do it. And then sure enough, it takes less than an hour, and then you spend 3 hours cleaning up its problems. But never does it take months. But again, it's trained on human data, human estimates for human complexities, and it just doesn't have those problems. So I'll let Eric talk to how we're starting to look at actually trying to project estimates from what it says.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we've been talking about this problem for I think feel like months.
Yeah.
But like part of so the solution for us, what we've been trying is like actually making a model based on actual performance data of an agent completing a task, right? And so it's kind of scientific. It's kind of like a data science kind of problem. But here's the input. Here's what it had to go estimate something, and here's what it said, and then it did the work, and here's what the actual result was. And literally by just running it a lot, like I did a system migration that ran for a couple days straight, but I had it store those pieces of data along the way. And then, I really don't know how to do data science and make neural network models or linear regression models. I made it through college, but that's where my math kind of stopped. But I can then use an agent to analyze that data and make a machine learning model of it. And from there, we can actually use that model to actually start to predict, what the actual agent will do. Uh, I think the downsides of that is that model is only as good as its input. So which LLM, was I using Codex or Claude? Or I think it's the only things hold true generally is if I keep everything else the same, then I should get I now know what the output is. But uh, the models are changing so fast. It's still an estimate. It's a better estimate than their human, man months kind of estimate that we did back in the
But it just means
90s and 2000s.
a test fixture with as many fixed things so that we can put a different model in that seat and rerun that
Mhm.
test. Even if it's the same model but a new version, the answer may be exponentially different. And the other part, because anytime I ask the team for an estimate, I know that the engineer is going to estimate their work, and they're going to be hugely wrong by a factor of two or maybe even three because they're super optimistic. Well, I can do anything and everything's easy. But they don't look at how much time is QA going to take to test the thing that they've built. And so then that adds a third thing. So now I've got a developer and a QA time. Well, what kind of output does that developer create? And is their workflow three iterations of bug bashing and then it gets there, or one iteration, like a big output and one big QA iteration? And then that also doesn't tell the answer, because the guy who iterates quickly may actually deliver faster, even though it's more human intensive than the guy who builds a big batch of a thing. And it's similar here, because I don't just use one model from one runtime. I use Claude Code, and I use the different models for different things, and I use Codex, and I use that for different things, and Gemini for different things. And so you really have the same problem where it's like, every model is a different human doing a different job, and it's dependent upon everybody else. And how do you estimate that? Like, if I'm working with just Anthropic to figure out building a spec, it's going to give me the estimate based on what it knows for that work. But you really have to have this bigger way of looking at, if I put a story in, how long does it take to get to production? And that's actually the estimate that I'm interested in. So you
I'm
have to have
starting to,
all this
yeah,
data.
I'm starting to see stories about the economic shift. It's like, while you might not have humans doing the thing, you're still paying for the tokens and all the
Oh,
usage.
totally. But it's still faster and exponentially cheaper. And uh, it's an expert at almost everything for, 80% of the use case of what we do, building a business system for most part. It can do that. Like it can do that really well. And it's way smarter than myself or Eric. So it's still worth using. That's why when we read that article, it's like, oh, he said no more AI. I'm like, whoa, that's an extreme response.
Yeah. What's the smallest production system that you trust AI to do end to end, no human review? What's the smallest thing that?
When Fable 5 that had just come out and was out for 3 days and was taken away, I think it was the closest model we've seen to be able to one shot something huge, which I think we would all agree you just shouldn't do. You need to spend a lot more time planning and then have it solve it incrementally rather than do a big thing. Um, but smallest system, I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts, Eric?
Uh, it's interesting because I've had, you know, these expensive, great models fail at writing a single line. Like, hey,
Mm.
go do X for me. Oh, I got to try 3 times because it messed it up. So yeah,
So none.
I
So
don't know. I mean,
I guess the answer is none.
Well, and the other part, taking it to production. So building a thing is one thing. Taking it to production the first time is another thing, but taking it to production once you have customers on it, I don't know that I would trust AI to really do that for us at this point. Maybe there are some segments that are maybe less important, or you have a good rollback strategy that's safe, and there's probably some scenarios, but I think it's not as simple as saying this one. I think it's more a case by case kind of a thing.
yeah, I think it goes back kind of some of the earlier points of, yeah, I'm having it do it, but does it have a robust test suite? And do we have all these other checks that, yeah, it still may not be a human checking it, but I'm having the AI check itself or different versions of itself.
do do you feel like it's a little off script, but do you feel like you're working harder, or do you feel like you're just changing your mental models on a faster basis?
I feel like I'm working harder just because my day job is full of calendar things where I'm interacting with people and doing those things. And it's only harder because I can't wait to get to the other day job, which is like building cool stuff. And I feel like, depending on if you're running lots of loops or you're running some harnesses or you've just still got 10 tabs open and you're hopping in and out of one thing and making all, it's harder, but again, that goes back to that move my cheese thing. I love it. I can't, like, my weekend is full of let's build cool things. So I think it's a personality thing as to if you think you're working harder or not.
Eric?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so much. I was actually just looking at my GitHub commits, like the number of contributions year over year, because I have it going back to 2009. And in the last 3 months, I've tripled my best year in
Tripled
terms of contributions.
in three
So
months.
it's tripled in 3 months. So I
Wow.
mean so what I'm able to produce is so much more, but it's also because now I at the end of the day I'm mentally fried, and yet I wake up like in the middle of the night thinking more about, oh, we got to do X.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of addiction now, which is now I can do all of these things. So I want to take on even more.
Well,
There's probably a healthy thing in there, which is like, hey, I use it and then I disconnect and I do other things, but I'm also doing that as well. So
but even that's not really fair to say. So you go on trips and you're chatting with your phone all the way on trips because in the background,
yeah, yeah,
AI is still building things for you. So disconnected even has a completely different definition.
it does. Yeah, yeah.
But you had mentioned something before this call around, and I totally agree with this. I've always had lists of things that I want to build, but they would either take too much human time to manually fiddle fart your way through it. And so the value that it would provide me was not worth me spending the time on it. But now that's not the case. Like now you can make a list of all the things you want to build, and you can build them over a weekend, and you can probably build four of the things on your list at one time, because you can have, you're basically just pointing the way through it. So it's I don't know, it's weird. I think there is an addiction element to it, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. So one of the things I built is it's a small 5 key keyboard that can scroll through all of my, my devices and swap them around. And took a little programming. And I said before I would, I'd buy it off Amazon and it would sit on a shelf for like 4 months before I'm like, I should just give it to Goodwill. Now it shows up and I hook it up to some AI, and while I'm doing all these other things. I get a thread going and the thing's programmed in like 15 minutes. And I've got so many examples of areas like that. And I think I'm more excited by some of these hardware things because I'm more software focused. So now being able to do these hardware things, like Raspberry Pis, like I hooked one up to my old F-250. I overlaid CarPlay on it and I made this thing. I think I got like almost 1 million views on an Instagram post for one of these things that I did in like 2 hours. Uh, and it struck a chord. And do I know exactly how it was implemented? No. Did I test it? Yeah, I did. But uh, yeah, I if you're if you have the creator mindset and you want to make things, the AI is incredibly powerful.
well, and
Yeah.
on the
Hardware is
business side of
gold.
it, Inventive was always formed so that we can do some number of projects for customers, delivering value, building products, etc. But we build the expertise and horsepower so that internally we can build products, things that we use internally, things that maybe our customers use. And for the past 10 years, I have not been able to make that actually happen, because a simple product is still six figures of income, and product designers and product managers and engineers, and trying to fit it in the cracks, and like for all sorts of reasons not going to happen. And now we're in a space where it's like, oh, we can build the crap out of a lot of products. And it's even made me pivot, because we internally have a lot of tooling subscriptions where it solves a purpose, but it's got some rough edges, but because it solves the purpose the best compared to everything else. And now I'm like, why don't we just build our own? Like it's just kind of become a throwaway thing, where this tool we have used for 20 years because it's the best in the industry for what we do, but still sucks. It's like, well, actually, why don't we just make one that we love? And that's not a big deal. So it's a fascinating time to be alive.
On that note, I have a comment, which I can turn it into a question, but from someone watching, is that this moment reminds me of several in my career when a tool became available and many people misinterpreted the ease of access to the tool. So things like Photoshop or video editing tools. So with design skill or video storytelling skill, AI is more than simply a tool, but it's a lower bar of access and belies how much skill is involved in collaborating with it.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. Oddly enough, Adobe is kind of being disrupted because, again, good tool, best tool, not perfect, and people are building replacements for it. But the thing that I think people without the skill of the person who does whatever they do professionally, I think they just kind of poo-poo away. That's easy. So if you look at like building Google, the front end of Google, very simple. It's a box and a button. And they're like, oh, that's so easy. Like, why can't we build all the tools that way? And it's because of all this complexity on the back end that a collection of people know how to put those things together. So what, and again, I don't know exactly the stats, but thousands of vibe coded applications are created on all these cool vibe coding platforms constantly. Like, I don't know if it's every day or every week or every month, whatever the stat is, but it's an alarming amount, a staggering amount of new things are created. And next to almost all of them never go live, never get a customer, never become real, they never get done. And it's because you have one person's point of view. You still have to have customers, you have to manage those customers, you have to have experts, so some amount of design review is still needed. Some amount of quality engineering still needed. The way they think is just vastly different than the way I think. So it's cool, it's great, but sometimes I think we need to slow down just a hair to make good use of these things.
Mhm. We have another question. So I'm interested in your take on leaning on the model to stay reliable over long tasks, like looping you mentioned earlier, or wrapping it in something like LangGraph to enforce for that for clients. If so, where do you draw the line, or how do you decide?
Can you say it one more time?
Sure. I'm interested in your take on leaning on the model to stay reliable over long tasks. I guess the looping you mentioned earlier,
Yeah, well, maybe that's pointed at you, Eric.
or wrapping
Yeah,
it in
yeah, I can.
something like LangGraph. Yeah.
So I mean, my take on that is similar to like, hey, we need to test code. You need to test the thing you're trying to automate, and I think a big piece of that, especially for long task, is oh, which portion can go off the rails. So you got to kind of test it, and that just means going through the same thing. Like I just made a prompt to produce a system, and the first thing I did with that prompt was, hey, send this out to 5 subagents, all independent, new context, and ask them to build the thing based on your prompt. We did that. 2 came back successful, 3 failed. Okay, well, how did they fail? How do we need to iterate it? So when you're doing that, you're looking at so you're testing this, proving out the thesis that, hey, I can make this thing do this multi-step process. Uh, and part of that is as you're going through the testing, figuring out, hey, which parts need to be code. Like you mentioned LangGraph, right? That's a coding framework that can be used to kind of automate it. So you're trying to figure out which parts do you spend the model to kind of stay true to the process, and which parts can you kind of enforce with old-fashioned software. I take another look at that, which is how much does it cost? How much does it cost the LLM? How many tokens does it burn to stay true to the process? Or, could it just write and run a script or a piece of code that is always deterministic, right? So you kind of look at, all 3 of those factors, right? It's the quick good or cheap. Which one of those do you want in a project? You also have that in long running tasks of what are you trying to optimize for. So there's no one answer fits all, but by basically experimenting and testing it and refining it is how I found to kind of get to the right place.
But and I also think that still breaking down your solution. So assuming that we're talking software, making small portable components that are easy to replace when they are no longer fit for purpose, and you can just swap them out and swap them in. That's great. And I like to start the solution from that perspective. So if I'm putting everything in a container, Docker, what container, what have you, that gives me a boundary. And so at one level, I have solution. And for some of my guardrails, I would edit, Claude.md or pick whatever you're using, but put some amount of rules in there. That's your first set of guardrails. Hey, this is kind of the direction we're going. These are the activities that we want to do. But then for each of those components, so if I have like a LangGraph container, well, the rules that apply in that environment versus an API project, a web project, a N8N container, all these different things, they all have different rules. So I try to think about what are the rules specific here, and what is my framework, and how are all my framework components compatible with one another. Forget what it is. Is it Drizzle? There's something I've been using for my database schema to be able to bring it up to speed, but that plus Postgres means I can't use enums within the database, which is a great feature, but given my framework, I can't use it. It's like, but Cloud wants to use it. And it's like, so it's just a simple, small thing is like drop that into the right, file for your agent to say, yeah, we don't do that. And, or another problem that I was having was, it, I want to put all my N8N schemas in source control, which means the source of truth is on the file system, and it kept wanting to actually make updates and changes within the container inside the N8N host. and that's not in the file system, which means I can't burn everything down and then turn it all back on again. So understanding all those things is also important so that you don't have to pay attention to it as much. Or again, you can have some kind of a combative agent come in and verify, here are all my codified rules in all these places. Audit the system now and then, make sure that we're finding all those holes that maybe pop up over time. Oh, you're muted.
I love that term audit because it expands on testing. Sorry if my microphone is as wonky again, but I do have another question from one of our viewers. How much time do you recommend founders, startup software and business intelligence take to capture the customer perspective before going full investment and build? So how much market research is how I'm reading that? And then similarly with AI changing so fast, how do you assess how to best integrate AI into projects? When do you say now we need to start putting AI automation into this project?
I'm sure you could have AI interview your customers. This is kind of a conversation that we have a lot. We can make AI do everything, and it's really amazing. But should we? I think is the question that not everybody asks. So, in my mind, putting a good product manager or a person that's able to wear that hat in front of multiple customers and kind of having those conversations, it's kind of still a good human to human kind of a thing. You could probably automate it, but I don't know that you should, because you need to see in the customer's eyes or prospective customer, when you talk about a certain thing, it's like, oh, wow, he just got really happy. But we've been talking for the past 15 minutes. Only now did I strike a chord. I don't know that your AI is going to catch that today. Maybe later, but and on that, there's kind of a two-part question. I'll let Eric answer on that side.
Uh, no, I totally agree. That's all I do. I agree with Andy every time he says something.
Mutual admiration
it's
society here.
yeah, yeah. No, it's I think in terms of collecting information from customers and talking to them, like that has to be done. Like that hasn't changed, and AI won't change it. It may make collecting some of it easier, but I think to the point, right? Like it's the nonverbal things of like either, somebody twitched in a certain way, and it's like, wait, what did I say something that, struck a chord the wrong way? It's really getting that information. Kind of going to the next part of that question is, when do you start building it in? I one, you should be building with it, because I think the productivity is just amazing right now. But I think you could build AI into products that that you might not even realize what it could do. And I'm finding I can use models to produce outputs that to try to write code the way we've been doing it since I don't know what, if the 50s or 60s. It would take a hundred years to try to do some of the things that these models can do. So coming up with the things that it's like, wow, that one's really hard. I don't know how to do that. Those are sometimes when it's like, hey, let's just actually put a LLM
Yep.
thing right in that the mushy part that I can't come up with hard rules for, and kind of test what you're getting out of that. It's kind of amazing. Like I did a thing where, you take a photo of stuff in a box, and it can go and identify every single thing. And so I started taking photos of all these like random piles of stuff, and I'm just shocked at how accurate some of these models are at detecting, random objects. So trying to, if I was building that as a product, somebody who's been writing software my entire career,
I wouldn't
I
know where to
still
start.
couldn't tell you how I'd even approach it, right? So it's that's the little bit of magic that's uh can like produce some results out of your product that are kind of mind blowing. So I definitely encourage people to ask the what if we tried it, and then try it. Just try it. Don't over analyze it and over design what it could do. Like experimenting is probably the best way to get results right now.
The thing that maybe wasn't asked but should have in that question, as a founder, don't assume that you know best. I find a lot of founders have big heads and like we're very confident in our understanding of the thing, but that's why we should disconnect the founder from being the one to interview the customer. Somebody who's really good at interviewing a customer isn't going to ask a lot of leading questions that hopefully directs towards what the founder wants to build. They're going to ask, what are your actual problems? Maybe they will uncover features that you weren't thinking about. Maybe they will validate that your idea sucks. That happens, and we should be okay with that. Um, but the other interesting part, kind of talking to what Erica is talking about, I like to say, here's the thing that I'm building. And, I define as much of the spec in the way that I understand it, in a way that fits the architecture that I'm thinking. But I immediately leave with, what do you think, Mr. AI? Like, how could this be better? And once we go through some of those gyrations and building the spec in the way that I think, I love the grill me skill. And if you haven't seen that, you should go look at that. But basically put your model, and it doesn't matter which one, into a loop. Hey, here's the thing that we're iterating on. Here's the spec. Ask me as many questions as you may have to further flesh out the thing, whether it's technical or it's more on the feature side. And every question it asks, it makes you think a little bit more in a different way about the thing that you're trying to build. But it may, your answer may pivot the spec and the plan, and it may also open up a whole new set of questions. And so it feels difficult because it's like, come on, man, I just want to build the thing already and get done. But going through that will actually get a better thing, both from a quality perspective, a usability perspective, maybe more applicable to the problem you're trying to solve. It will totally expand because you're only thinking about it from your human experience up to this point in your life. It's thinking about it based on every human's experience up to the point in their life. So grill me
So
is
we're gonna leave it at that. We're at our hour. I know we filled an hour, and we are every month, every third Thursday of the month, we have on LinkedIn. We have the lineup for the rest of the year. So hopefully you can join us next month. And thank you, Eric and Andy, for this conversation.
I love having you here, Mimi. Having the moderator so
For
much.
sure.
Otherwise, Eric and I will just talk